All right, guys, we are here today to talk a little bit about dating with third parties. What I mean by that is dating with interpreters, right? So if you're going to Colombia or you're going to China, or you're going to the Ukraine, and you happen to go out on a date with a woman who doesn't speak English. Now, a lot of the women there do speak English, right?
Of course.
And this is, by the way, guys, we're joined here by Anna, who does speak English and Russian. You speak anything else besides
somewhat? Well,
somewhat, yeah, okay.
I forgot more languages than I knew.
So you have obviously done your fair share of interpreting on dates, right? And guys, if you've never been out with an interpreter on a date before, it is a unique experience because it's not just you and her. It's you, her, and her, right? And all of a sudden you got this third party in on this whole thing, and it's just a little bit different, right? And you got to get used to it because the first time you go, it's just going to be strange. You're going to be talking to her, or you're talking to her, or you're talking to, I mean, what are you doing, right? It gets confusing, and you're trying, you know, but it shouldn't be. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to make that work for you, right? So number one rule, I think, is when you're on a date with an interpreter, right, you should be giving all of your attention to your date, not to the interpreter, right? Now, we've lost a lot of interpreters to you guys, right? You marry a lot of our interpreters. I get that. So if you want to date an interpreter, then go date the interpreter. But don't flirt with the interpreter or do stuff with the interpreter while you're on the date, right? You're on the date to be on the date. So when you're on the date, you're talking to the date. You're looking at your date's eyes dreamily, right? You're just looking at her and, you know, you really are passionate about this date. She's looking back at you and she's talking, and the interpreter is just interpreting what's going on, right? I mean, would you agree that that's the best way to make that work?
Oh, absolutely. You know, you're there to meet this lady and not the interpreter. Interpreter there just to translate. Although it never hurts to make a friend with interpreter, so she'll do a good job. But
so this is how it's supposed to work. Talk, 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 interpreting. And the interpreter should just be like a machine. She should just be there interpreting. Even if a food server or somebody comes up and starts talking in Russian to your date, which, guys, if you're at a restaurant, it's pretty important. You want to know what they're ordering. You want to know what's going on, right? So if they come up and she starts talking to the food server, you should, the interpreter, and Anna, do you do this? Do you still interpret what's going on between the two of them?
of course, I let the guy know what the order is coming up, so what to expect. In case if there is 3 bottles of vodka coming up, you know, you probably want to know that.
Yeah, you know, but because if you spoke the language, you would hear that interaction between those two. And that's why an interpreter is there, to interpret everything that you normally should be hearing. So it's not just the conversations between you and your date, but it's the other auxiliary conversations that are going on that you really should be aware of. And a good interpreter, what we call a simultaneous interpreter, will be doing that constantly. So you're hearing not, well, she kind of said this. No, it's really trying to interpret as closely as possible as word to word, which isn't easy to do, is it? It's a difficult thing.
It's pretty hard. You need to have your brain wired a certain way in order to, you know, understand one language, translate it immediately in a second language. It's just a pretty hard task.
Okay. Number 2, it is imperative. It is really important that you do use multiple interpreters when you're out and you're dating these different women. And let's talk about 2 different scenarios, okay? Let's talk first about the scenario where you've met someone and now you're going out on a second or maybe 3rd or 4th date with that person. Now, should you use the same interpreter on each date, or should you maybe switch up the interpreter? What do you think?
Well, second, third, or 4th date, I would suggest to switch interpreter. And there's nothing against your original interpreter. You just want to get a little bit different feeling when you date with a lady. You know, if you use a different interpreter, because interpreter brings out his or her personality to a date. So your impression of a lady in many cases, depends on the personality of your interpreter. So in order to see the true personality of the lady you're dating, you know, you wanted to use somebody else just to get a full picture.
Absolutely. I could not agree more with that because, guys, the last thing you want to do is have a wonderful date with this woman, right? And then you go on the second date, it's great. You go on a 3rd date, it's great. And you ask her to marry you. Things are going great. Then she comes to the United States, but she comes, not the interpreter. And all of a sudden, it's totally different. It's not what you thought it was because the interpreter really did insert a little bit too much of her personality or her, so we can say, spin into it. Maybe not intentionally. Maybe it's just something that she did because she wanted that relationship to work. She wanted things to happen, so she, you know, was prodding the relationship along, prodding the conversation along. inserting some kind of, just laughter, made everybody feel more comfortable. But you have to be able to be comfortable one-on-one, regardless of who the interpreter is. So if you change up the interpreters and use different ones on different dates, you don't have to do it like on the second date. You can use the same interpreter. There's something to be said for consistency a little bit, right? And everyone feels comfortable. But I'm telling you, by the third, fourth, fifth dates, you definitely want to be using a different interpreter. She doesn't speak any English, and you're not getting exactly what's going on there, okay? Very, very important. Now let's talk about the next scenario, and that would be when you're going to the social, let's say, and you're meeting different women for the first time, and you're going from table to table. Now, do you want to switch up interpreters there? Maybe throughout the social, maybe switch. What do you think about that?
On the first date out, in first meetings, I'd suggest to use the same interpreter because, an interpreter who's assigned to you, she'll get to know you. So you'll have a little talk before the social starts. She'll know who you are, what you do, what you're looking for. So she's gonna be your matchmaker. So that's important for her to understand who you are. And if you keep switching people, they're not gonna get to know you. And she's gonna be presenting you to women. So her impression of you will be very, very important for your future dates.
Okay, I'll agree with that to a point. But if the chemistry you feel with that interpreter is not really good, or you feel like you're not getting your point across and things just aren't going, then really early on you need to make a switch. And you need to.
Absolutely, yes. Of course, if you feel that things are not working, just let our staff know. We'd be happy to find someone else for you. Nobody's heart will be broken. Everybody will be fine. I'm sure we can find somebody else who'll be a little bit better match for you.
In 23 years of doing this, I've seen just about everything. Although every day we do seem to see new things, but I've seen quite a bit. And I'll tell you guys, anything can happen. And when you are paired with an interpreter, that's important because you're there, and that communication that interpreter or matchmaker is going to assist you with is extremely important. And there is a certain chemistry between two people, even if it's the matchmaker and the client. And if that chemistry, normally it's fine. We hire really, really good people. They're professionals. They do a good job of what they do. But sometimes it just isn't a great chemistry, and if that's the case, then I urge you to go talk to the staff, go talk to the manager or the tour leader and say, I think I'd be better off maybe switching, or maybe you really like the interpreter. Maybe it's like, oh my gosh, the interpreter you pair with me is someone I want to go out with. Well, if that's the case, switch it, because you don't want to use the matchmaker or interpreter that you really like, because that is going to alter the way you're thinking and your mindset when you're talking to the women, don't you think?
Well, yeah, absolutely, because if you like your interpreter, you probably not going to be feeling comfortable with her interpreting your conversation to other women, and you'll be concerned of what you're saying, and that's probably not going to work to them.
So what's the etiquette, Anna, when you go out on a date with an interpreter? Okay, let's say that we went to the social, we did well, we met Tanya, and for those of you who don't know, my wife is Tanya, and it's going well, and now you want to go out to dinner. You're going to go out to a decent dinner, a nice dinner, and you're going to have an interpreter because she doesn't speak enough English or whatever it is. So what's the etiquette at dinner? I'm buying a nice meal for her. Do I have to buy the same nice meal for the interpreter? I'm also paying the interpreter, right, to be there.
Well, of course, interpreters should have common sense not to order a 3-course meal and 3 drinks. Obviously, but there is nothing wrong if interpreter get herself a cup of tea or cup of coffee, so it will be a little bit easier, more comfortable for her to just translate. So
I could have a nice, let's say, steak and lobster dinner, okay, just for argument's sake. Although you're not going to find a lot of places over there for steak and lobster in the Ukraine, and I don't have to then do that for the interpreter, right? Because interpreter's going to be working, and interpreter's going to be talking a lot, right? Twice as much as anybody else. So
and you absolutely don't have to purchase interpreter's meals. If you feel like, if you like interpreter and you feel like getting her something, definitely feel free to do that. It's up to you. But normally our interpreters, have common sense, and they're not going to be ordering a bunch of different stuff at your expense.
Okay. And many of the interpreters are matchmakers as well, and they're helping. So after the date, what kind of feedback should I expect to get from the matchmaker?
So after a lady leaves, after the evening is concluded, just talk to your interpreter and just ask her what's her opinion on the lady, what she thinks, what impression she got. An interpreter would be happy to share her feedback, and then you can use this feedback or not use it, but I think it's very helpful too. And again, when you switch interpreter, you get different feedback from different people, and they can have different impression of the same person.
You know what's great about our tours too, guys, is that we don't charge you extra for an interpreter if you don't need one. And what I mean by that is that, we try to price our tours to give you the best possible value that we can by providing you with an extraordinary service. And many times you don't need an interpreter. There's many women where you go, whether it's China, whether it's Costa Rica, Colombia, Peru, Ukraine, where they speak English. When I met Tanya, she spoke wonderful English. We never used an interpreter. So there's no reason to charge you extra for an interpreter that you may or may never use. So that if you do decide that you're going to go out on a date with a woman and you want to have an interpreter because her English isn't quite where you'd like it to be, or maybe non-existent, then at that point you would pay for an interpreter. It's normally somewhere between $15 to $20 an hour. And again, I think that's great because you're not having to prepay it and then maybe never use it. Make
Absolutely,
sense?
of course. Yeah, what's the point of paying for something you don't need?
Yeah, so that's always been our philosophy, and I think it works really well. But even, let's just take the Philippines, for instance. When you're at the socials, everyone there speaks English, which is great. That's one of the wonderful things about the Philippines. But you're still supplied with a buddy at the social, and that buddy, even though everyone speaks English, helps you navigate. It's your wing woman, it's your matchmaker. So it's not just about interpreting, but it's also about getting through that social. And at all of our socials, you're given an interpreter / matchmaker for free. It doesn't cost you anything. That's part of the tour for the whole time you're at the social and at the hospitality rooms too. I mean, if you're coming in with someone and you need some interpreting done, they'll do it for you there as well. It's only when you go out on private dates outside of the socials and the hospitality room to where you may have to engage with a interpreter or matchmaker for that. And again, we not charge you up front for that, which is a big difference, I think. So that's important to keep in mind. But I'll tell you, the staff that we have, the matchmakers at those socials, which are all included in the price of your tour, do an amazing job. They really do. I was just there recently and I saw it firsthand again, as I have for many, many years, how they'll get to know someone like Anna said. They get to know you, they understand who it is you're looking for, and they know a lot of these women personally, and they'll make recommendations even about women that aren't present at that social. Maybe she couldn't come that night or whatever it was. I saw that happen the last tour I was on, where this gentleman was looking for someone he was very specialized in what he was looking for. And his matchmaker's like, I have the perfect woman for you, but she's not here tonight, but I'll make the introduction. And she did the next day, and they hit it off amazingly well. And they're still going back and forth with each other. So that's invaluable, guys, because you're only there for a short time, and it's difficult to really get to know all these women from the time that you're there. But if someone already knows the women, like Anna or the other people at the staff there, then they can help speed up that so much faster by doing the actual matchmaking, doing the heavy lifting for you to make those connections with the people that they think are going to be best suited for you as well. So you are looking, they're looking, and between all of us, we're going to make a match and make something happen, right?
Absolutely.
Because that's what we do. All right, guys. So that's our Interpreting 101 for today. Hopefully that helps, because I'll tell you, it's a great, great tool if it's used properly, right? And if it's not used properly, it can actually hinder you. So if you have any questions about it, talk to your tour leader, talk to the staff, and make sure you're getting the best out of it, okay? All right.